Before delving too deep, I just want to set expectations for this video. The knowledge that we have related to our modern root race is much more extensive than what we have even for Atlantis. At this point, I've made 4 videos covering Atlantis, so this video will be the first of many videos that will probably take a while to finish, and as such, this video will only be covering the first civilization of the first subrace of the 5th root race. I know, it's a mouthful. However, we will have some introduction to the 5th root race as a whole. Throughout these videos, we will actually be able to cover a few of the distinct countries that formed within each subrace. New videos will cover subsequent civilizations and subraces. Keep in mind as we start, that borders and wars don't exist up until the Copper Age, while the Gold and Silver Ages remain war and border free. As I've stated in previous videos, root races do not abruptly start and end, even though there usually are natural disasters that mark the ends and beginnings. This takes place in part due to the law of octaves, or law of 7, which I've mentioned in the previous videos. The do note that ends one octave is the same note that begins the next. As such, we need to consider how the end of the prior root race that started in Atlantis formed all the different races that populate our world today. The modern, or 5th root race, is known as the Aryan root race, and before people jump to any conclusions about that name, know that the vast majority of people living on the planet at present would be considered Aryan, regardless of skin color, nationality, or appearance. I go more into detail on this in the video on the occultism of the Nazis, but the short version is that the Nazis lied. They intentionally misused the name Aryan as racial propaganda to add an air of ancient mythology and mysticism to their lineage. Everyone you would see on a day-to-day basis at this time is Aryan. To not be Aryan at this time on Earth, you would have to be either an off-planet entity or a being that has discovered a way to keep its body living for many thousands of years. If it hasn't already been made clear by what I've said so far, in this video I'll mainly be telling the detailed story of what happened to the first civilization at the start of the first subrace, and how the modern root race started off on the wrong foot in the first of many blunders that brought about our current society. The first subrace of our modern root race formed primarily in Central Asia. It is commonly referred to as the Central Asian or Tibetan subrace. At this time, the continent of Asia was referred to as Ashhark. Keep in mind that new root races as well as subraces do not start abruptly at the end of a previous root race. There is an ebb and flow, an ascension and a descension. As such, the 5th root race began to form towards the end of the 4th. This first subrace of the 5th root race started to form in the northern central region of the Middle East, as well as in modern-day Mongolia, but ultimately settled and fully formed on the Tibetan Plateau in modern-day Tibet and China, for reasons we will delve into within this and the next couple videos. Now, if you remember my video on Atlantis, you will remember that the 7th subrace of Atlantis were the Mongolians, so they will be forming a part of this first subrace as well. One final point that I wish to remind everyone of is that while this portion of the story focuses on the prominent civilizations in Central Asia, many distinct places on Earth are populated at this time. Modern-day India, Egypt, and the Americas are populated with the remnants of the Atlantean root race. Even in modern-day Australia, there were remnants of the Atlantean root race who were descended from the Lemurians. All that aside, let us begin. The first major civilization in the first subrace were the people of Tikliamish. And don't worry, I will be providing spellings down in the description. This civilization existed in the area around modern-day Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. The capital city of Koorkalai was built near the banks of a great sea, and into the sea flowed the mighty banks of the Oksoseria River. This river flowed in from the east, heading westward, and stretched across almost the entire Tikliamishian countryside. The water and nutrients that the river carried kept the land rich and fertile. The Great Sea to which I referred earlier was a body of water that occupied the region from the modern-day Caspian to the Aral Seas. The Caspian and Aral Seas are remnants of that great body of water, and the Amu Darya is what is left of the Oksoseria River. The cataclysm that marked the end of the Atlantean root race greatly reshaped this region, as well as many other regions on Earth, which is why the Amu Darya flows in a completely different direction at this time. In many ways, Tikliamish could be referred to as a failed attempt at starting a new root race. Their society focused extensively on trivialities and bad habits that were unnecessary for the survival and spiritual progress of humanity. Prior to the influence of the country of Tikliamish, clothing could be functional or ornamental, but was never something that people particularly obsessed over. The people of Tikliamish invented the idea of fashion and clothing trends so that people would waste an excessive amount of time over vanities. The country was also the first society that highly valued the faculty of memorization at the expense of other mental faculties. In previous videos on Atlantis, we covered the notion that Atlanteans didn't really focus on memorizing information. They primarily relied on prior experience, and experience was considered the best measure of a person's capability. Thus, elders were revered. That practice changed in Tikliamish, and that habit as well as many other bad habits have been passed down to us today. Thus, memorizing information in a rote manner became the norm for education throughout the modern root race. These people also invented hypnotism, a base act that influences a person's subconscious in order to bend them to another's will. They also greatly diminished society's knowledge of music, and with it, the knowledge of the law of octaves. Many great values passed on by the Atlanteans were lost very quickly. Gurdjieff goes more into detail about what modern societies in modern times know about music, as well as their knowledge of its true purpose. So if you're interested in delving more into that, I highly suggest reading Beelzebub's tales to his grandson. The people of Tikliamish also developed an obsession with money, as well as obtaining items of value. A portion of the roots of modern materialism can be traced back to this civilization. Division of classes based on wealth, as well as the notion that some people are born to immense wealth and can live out their lives in luxury and relative ease, while others must toil for their living, were solidified during the time of this civilization. They also invented the alchemical notion that one could turn base metals into gold, provided they discover the secret process. But no one during this time period ever made that discovery, in spite of many failed attempts. Everything about the Tikliamishian civilization was based in opulence and decadence. If you think our modern society is decadent, you'd be mistaken if you compare us to Tikliamish. The people of this country went so far as to invent and popularize, well, for lack of a better phrase, a toilet bed. It was essentially a futon with plumbing. This invention actually caused many problems as human beings weren't meant to use the bathroom lying down. Only the rich could really afford these things, and the invention was lost to time when the people of the lower classes rebelled against the rich. It was seen as a symbol of their laziness, and systematically destroyed during the rebellion. Tikliamish also had something of a culture war with the more civilized, but still flawed country of Maralpleicie, which I will be talking about more in the next video. At the time of Tikliamish's fall, human sacrifice as well as slavery were common practices. Mostly slaves were sacrificed, but the practice of a strong member of a family burning a weaker member of the family would sometimes occur. The sick were more commonly sacrificed as part of this practice, but sometimes a father would sacrifice a young son, his wife, or an elderly member of the family. The civilization went very sour very fast. While this period was meant to be a golden age, it never really reached that standard. The aforementioned slaves were people who were owned as a bounty from combat. The reason this attempt at starting the fifth root race failed was due to the influence of some very negative individuals. Good and evil were terms invented during the Atlantean epoch. Prior to Tikliamish, these terms were used in their correct, objective sense. For example, a fire burning in a fireplace heating a house would be good, while a fire outside of a fireplace burning down a house would be evil. It was a priest from Tikliamish named Armanatora who first widely used these terms in reference to morality. From here, it has devolved to a point where everyone considers what they like to be good and what they dislike evil. And since everyone's opinions on the matter differ, our society today now lives with a subjective definition of good and evil. This also gave rise to the idea of condemning people who are deemed evil, rather than seeking to understand their actions. Condemnation prevents understanding and positive change. It is no wonder that eventually the people of Tikliamish met their karmic downfall. This occurred just a few short centuries after the final sinking of Atlantis. Great winds began to blow across the earth. These winds stirred up sands, which began to spread in the western portion of the country, nearer to the capital city of Koorkalai, and spread their way eastward. A massive desertification took place, and swallowed up what was once a great and fertile land. In modern times, the region is referred to as the Carkoon Desert. According to Gurdjieff, the civilization met its karmic downfall with many unfortunate practices, including slavery, idol worship, as well as excessive animal and occasional human sacrifices. A portion of the people of Tikliamish survived. Some went westward to Egypt. Some went southward to modern-day India or Pearl Land, while others headed east to the neighboring country of Maralpleicie. The majority, however, were buried beneath the sands. The massive desertification took place over many years as the sands blew eastward. This is the reason why much of the Middle East is covered in sand.